Hey, I'm back. I know it's been a little bit of a delay, but I'm back with an American Terror.
A lot of my American Terror stories leave some doubt. Was it real or not? But this one is for real. I am completely convinced that the Mad Gasser of Mattoon existed. I know what you're wondering. What the heck is a Mattoon? Well, it's right here in the deadly tropical jungles of Illinois. Mattoon's a small town even today, and I imagine it was even smaller back in 1944 when the Mad Gasser came to be. The Mad Gasser struck in September 1944 while World War II raged. For weeks on end, people in Mattoon got sick. A lot had to go to the hospital. The victims reported a number of, effects, coughing, for example. Maybe he's right here. But they have dizziness, vomiting, headache, tremors, temporary paralysis, spitting up blood, and more. The victims said they smelled something sickly, kind of sweetish, before the horrible symptoms started to hit. Imagine you're waking up in the middle of the night, there's a horrible smell in the air, you feel pain, you're shaking, and then your body is paralyzed while you start to vomit blood. What a nightmare. In the first 2 days, 4 houses were hit. Now, central Illinois was quite warm that September 1944, so people had to leave open their windows. Air conditioning wasn't so common back then. This made it really easy for the Mad Gasser. All he had to do was sneak up to a home and vent his noxious gas right straight into the bedroom. After the first few strikes, the police ambled into action. They decided, without even investigating, that it was simply a case of hysteria. It's possible the police thought this because they were a bunch of chauvinist pigs. You see, most of the people who reported the effects of the gasser were women. I guess the cops in Mattoon said, well, women, they're hysterical, you know. But of course there's women reporting it. This is September 1944. The men are mostly working in war factories in other cities or they're fighting the Axis. The women are the people who stayed behind, so who else is there to report it? Then the police chief really cracked down. He is a huge jerk. His name was C.E. Cole, and let that name live in infamy as one of the worst police chiefs in history. He decided that all the reports of a gasser were in error. All of them. Again, no investigation. He just decided. It's kind of resembles modern times because you're allowed to have an opinion about someone without actually researching and finding out anything about them. It's happened to me, so I guess he did then too. Then Chief Cole then said that anyone who reports a gassing, because he decided they were fake, would be arrested. Well, naturally, the number of reports plummeted. Who wants to be arrested? No one wants a night in jail. So then Cole said, hey, look, the reports went down. They must be fake. This is a really great case of circular reasoning. So because of Cole's idiocy, we actually don't know how many people were gassed. No one was reported to have died, but after Cole clamped down, it's possible that someone died, but it was reported as something else. I mean, think about it. You're laying in your bed, a deadly gas creeps into your window, and then you're paralyzed and you choke on your own vomit or your heart stops. How would anyone know you were killed by the Mad Gasser? Your bedroom window's open, so the gas is dissipated before they find you, and it might be a day or two before that happens. Remember, your husband's off in Detroit making tanks for the war effort, and he won't be home to visit till Saturday, so there could have been deaths. We do know that no one died in the first few days, the only time the attacks were actually being reported. In addition, there could have been long-term effects on health. Since the official word was that there is no gasser, anyone who had chronic effects or who died years later wouldn't have blamed it on the gas. Now, to be clear, I have no evidence that the gasser actually managed to kill anyone, or that his gas had long-term health effects, but by the nature of the police response, I can't have such evidence. If it exists, it would have been suppressed. Now, I know that crackpots throughout history have claimed that the establishment kept people from the truth. Of course, most of the time, these guys are just crackpots. But the ugly truth is sometimes there is authorities keeping us from the truth, not because of a sinister and complicated plot, but simply because it's always much easier to dismiss something unusual than to investigate. I'm a little nervous because the dog's walking around by the lights. I'm afraid he's going to topple him over. Anyway, when word got out about the Mad Gasser, then the academic community, who also did no investigation, decided that the mad gasser was the result of hysterical women. And since that time, the mad gasser has been used as a classic example of mass hysteria in psychological journals. They will say, oh, this is a case like the mad gasser. But the problem is, the mad gasser incident doesn't actually resemble real-life cases of mass hysteria. In other words, the police of Mattoon pretended nothing happened, and then the scientists agreed with them because it was a weird story. It's always easier to be a debunker. In my opinion, this really hurts the case for psychologists doing real science. I mean, the mad gasser is still in textbook as a fake thing, and it's plainly a disservice to psychology to leave it there. So the mad gasser isn't well known, or he's assumed to be fake because of this suppression, but also, more frighteningly, that's why the mad gasser was never caught. If you look at the actual facts of the mad gasser case, it's quite clear that the reports aren't hysteria at all. People really did get sick. You don't vomit blood because you're hysterical, right? There was multiple reports right at the start. Usually mass hysteria, there's like one person reports a case, then everyone else kind of has copycats and they feed off it. But this is a bunch at the start and then it goes away. So people really did see a dark figure running away from their home. The police cover-up was really incompetent and badly done. The Mattoon Police Department of 1944 let down their community, and I hope it didn't lead to people dying. I'm not claiming that the mad gasser was supernatural or alien, though that'd be cool. The fact that the gasser seems pretty inept, I mean, really no one's actually proven to have been killed, that might also support the idea that it was a real person or persons, because, you know, if it was a fake story, you'd have deaths. Probably. So one chemist actually figured out what the chemical is that the gasser used. It's perchloroethylene. This is an organic solvent. It smells kind of sickly sweet, and it causes all the symptoms listed. It penetrates clothing and skin. You don't have to inhale it. It just has to touch you. Now, if you drink perchloroethylene, it's quickly lethal. But as a gas, it's only obnoxious unless it's really concentrated. But the windows are open. The gasser couldn't actually concentrate it enough to cause death. Now, perchloroethylene does cause long-term liver damage, but since the mad gasser was officially fake, if someone went to the doctor with liver cancer or cirrhosis or something, the victim's doctors would have found some other explanation for it. Interestingly, if you're drunk, perchloroethylene is a lot more dangerous, so I guess it's lucky that none of the victims were plastered when they got attacked. But since the gasser was almost certainly real, who was he or she? Best guess, a mad scientist. And by mad, I don't mean like Frankenstein, I mean literally psychotic. A person with some training in chemistry and a grudge against the town that he perceived. The gassing only seemed to happen for a few weeks, then it stopped. Maybe the mad scientist ran out of perchloroethylene, or he decided his plan had failed because he hadn't killed anyone, or he changed his mind. He was never caught. This book, the author says he solved the mystery. He even names the guy who did it. And I'm convinced by his research. You should read it if you can find it. For me, it's enough to know there was a mad scientist in Mattoon, Illinois in 1944 who tried to kill people with a deadly chemical. So what's to know about this? Well, it's interesting that mad scientists are real. And it's also, we could use this, we could riff on it for a story or a scenario, for a role-playing game. For example, we could bring it into a supernatural alien element. I'm happy to stick with mad scientists, but, you know, since poison gas was used in World War I, maybe a Call of Cthulhu adventure or ghost story could have it be the ghost of someone killed by a gas attack in World War I. Maybe the ghost rose up because of the horrors of World War II. Oh yeah, by the way, just to make things clear, it's sometimes said that poison gas wasn't used in World War II, but it absolutely was used. The Germans famously used it to kill innocent civilians, and the Japanese used mustard gas and blistering agents and other things extensively in China against both civilians and soldiers. And this wasn't just before Pearl Harbor either. They made a major chemical attack on a Chinese city in 1943, and they certainly used it before and after that. It's true they didn't use gas warfare on the Americans, but this might have been more a matter of lack of artillery in the South Pacific than any unwillingness to do so. Oh, just as a side note, I've said it before, but I'm going to say it again. Some people say, oh, Hitler didn't use poison gas because Hitler was gassed in World War I, and he didn't like it. Well, I'm sure Hitler didn't like being poison gassed, but he was 100% willing to use poison gas in World War II. He even discussed using the V1 buzz bombs to deliver nerve gas to London, but he didn't. Not because, you know, even Hitler has a good side, but because his advisor said the Western Allies have lots of poison gas on hand, and they probably have the same nerve gas we do. We didn't, but they didn't know that. And they would use it against his forces in retaliation. So it was fear, not goodness, that caused Hitler to hold back. This might be a good lesson on how to deal with madmen. But anyway, let's go back to another madman, the gasser. So the gasser wasn't deterred. He totally got away with it. I wonder if he took his mad gassing somewhere else, maybe with a deadlier chemical, harder to detect. As I pointed out, if he used a chemical that actually killed you, it would be really hard for people to spot it in the 1940s. They would just have someone dead in their bedroom and say, well, I guess they had a heart attack. So I think that a mad scientist is a terrifying explanation, and it's also the real one. And a scientist that uses poison gas, a weapon that sneaks invisibly into your house where you have no defense against it, that's even worse. The good news is that if the mad gasser was in his 20s or 30s in 1944, he'd be dead today, or I guess over 100 years old. But what if he had an apprentice or a child to pass on his infernal goal? Watch out, Mattoon! Though, I suppose there's no reason he would have to stick to Mattoon, is there? Well, subscribe to me, click for notifications, and here's something that we're selling right now in my website, and which is Peterson Games, and I hope you check it out. Thanks!